1990 and Graham was in Israel, Tel Aviv. He and his traveling buddies were on a rooftop. It's like time stopped. At first Graham didn't see it, but his friends did see a UFO, most likely ET. Graham prayed to the sky, probably said, I want to believe. Now this UFO had a trick up its sleeve. It came back swiftly.
Please come back.
Up over the horizon.
Through the thin haze of clouds.
It was polygonal.
It was crystal clear like a shape.
Its shape was a dodecahedron. Dodecahedron.
Grimerica. Remember, our spacecraft are based on the design of the ancient Chinese of 5,000 years ago, that they had rockets. I mean, they were launching rockets. And mostly for fireworks.
Okay, guys, welcome back to the Grimerica Show. We are going to be chatting to the one and only Jacques Vallee a little bit later about, you guessed it, UFOs. And, of course, Red Pill Junkie's going to join us for that interview, which is great to get those two together. I don't know if you guys remember, but we heard Red's story about how enamored he was to meet Jacques at, was that UFO Congress a few years ago?
I think so.
No, it was in Mexico, wasn't it?
No,
it was in Mexico City.
No, I think it was...
well, we'll find out.
I think he went to the UFO Congress.
We'll find out a little bit later. But yeah, so looking forward to this one. And so is my co-host across from me here, the one and only Graham. I'm on video right now, and I didn't even know that, Dunlop.
No, really?
Yeah.
Come on. Where is it?
It was the best I could come up with on short notice.
Why?
I don't know. Why not? I like to surprise people.
What do you do? Really?
I'm wearing a robe, bro.
Robe, bro?
Robe, bro. A bro robe? Is that more apt?
So why are we doing the video? I don't get it.
I don't know. I just threw it up.
For what?
Because I figure we won't be able to do any interview videos this week, so
right.
I just throw the intro up and surprise you.
All right.
And now I've thrown you off your game for the intro, totally. So now I like you're vulnerable
Where's the
for
camera?
the intro. It's there. That one. Yeah. Hi, guys. Probably nobody's watching because I didn't tell anybody.
Good.
So there's that.
Well, the problem is I got to read emails the other way. That's the problem. It's not set up. We're not set up properly for this.
That's okay.
Anyways, I got to order some new posters for behind me as well if we're going to do video, just to switch it up a bit.
Well, we got the new book, so we could, it came with that cool picture. We should put that up someplace.
Yeah.
The bookmark. Grimsteak's there. Hold it up so Grimsteak can see it. I feel like Grimsteak is always there. Anyway, so what do you got for us?
What do I got? Well, I got figured for this. I was going to do like a weather modification report, but it still might be a little fresh with Hurricane Irma flying around. And I figured... we're
going to get into the weather modification for the hurricanes eventually, but we'll wait till people have power.
Okay. So I've been saving up listener UFO sightings. I figured it's appropriate to do some UFO accounts for the Jacques Vallee episode.
Absolutely. So you want to jump right into the quotes right away?
And I've got a UFO quote as well, ready to go.
Darren and Graham are going deep. It's a profound
jumping right into the quote
UFO
this week.
Quote of the week.
I feel like we forget to do it sometimes now.
No, sometimes. A couple months ago we did. I heard about it.
UFO quote
you got complaints?
Week.
I was going to do one from Jacques Vallee, but I thought that's kind of lame since we're going to be talking to him after.
Well, we know what. Why don't we have Jacques Vallee give us a quote at the end?
Yeah, here's one.
Give us Jacques Vallee say something that will become a profound quote in time.
Over the past 18 years, I've acted as a scientific consultant to the U.S. Air Force on the subject of unidentified flying objects, UFOs. As a consequence of my work on the voluminous Air Force files and to a greater extent of personal investigations of many puzzling cases and interviews with witnesses of good repute, I have long been aware that the subject of UFOs could not be dismissed as mere nonsense. And that was Dr. J. Allen Hynek, the chairman of the Department of Astronomy at Northwestern University and scientific consultant for Air Force investigations of UFOs from 1948 until 69. Project Sign, Grudge, and Blue Book.
It's a good year.
Yep.
I wouldn't know, but Woodstock and shit, right?
Yeah.
You weren't even born in
I feel
69.
like it was a better time back then. I was listening to some ELO on the way here.
You would have fucking went crazy back then. All there was commercial radio.
And it brought me back to like the 60s and 70s where it seemed, I don't know, it seemed like there was less bullshit.
Internet. You take the internet out of the equation and we're right back there, buddy.
Like I was listening to John Keel's essays on flying saucers and stuff. And it's amazing the stuff they were doing in the 60s. Like it was quite open. The investigations and all the people looking at it, and they were talking to the government about it. Now it's just all, it's all just ridiculed. I mean, it's opening up in a lot of other ways, I guess, but it does seem like in some ways we haven't even gotten very far.
If it was still the fucking 70s, we wouldn't have a show, bro.
That's
Unless
right.
we were like recording onto tapes and handing them out at the mall. I guess that could be something.
Could be.
I suppose people were doing that too, right?
I think it was more
around.
radio, I think.
Radio?
Yeah.
Underground radio?
I guess people were probably recording into cassette tapes as well, yeah.
Well, when I was a kid, we used to record just for ourselves. Do like fake little news things.
Little cassette tapes, really?
No, here's Trevor with sports.
No.
Yeah. Here I am doing the fucking same thing with you 25 years later. Yeah.
Except not talking about sports.
No, talking about other stuff. Probably just as many people listening.
Huh.
Did I throw you off again?
Yep.
Do you have any synchros?
No, I've got some sightings. So.
Sightings?
Yeah, sightings from listeners.
From listeners?
Yeah.
Oh, I've seen some of those come through, I think. There was also a sighting discussion going back and forth on the Facebook today. Actually, I'll look that up while you read those because it was from Float Tank. Isaac from Float Tank, Float Life.
Yeah.
Seen a UFO, I think.
Really?
I'll find out.
Okay, yeah, you look that up and I'll read a short one here. So this is from Selena. Hey guys, listening to episode 220 right now, and it reminded me of a sighting that happened with my husband and I. A few years ago, July 21st, 2013, I worked for a company and we'd won a trip to Suncadia, about 80 miles east of Seattle in Rundle, Washington. It was for a weekend on Saturday morning, so we went to the restaurant for breakfast. After we finished eating, we kind of sat there and enjoyed the view of the forest and river below. As we quietly sat, there was a shadow the size of an SUV that kind of moved over the trees. We looked up, nothing. No clouds, no plane, nothing. It was total blue sky that day too. Then the shadow slowly moved across the trees away from us. At this point, we couldn't believe what we were seeing, so we got up and to go closer to the window and look up to see if it was a plane or not. Again, nothing. It got farther and farther away. It almost looked as if something shadow-like was crawling across the treetops, or something just slowly drifting overhead, and all we could see was the shadow. My husband doesn't believe in UFOs either, so he kind of looked at me and said, "Did you see that too? Meant to write you guys a while ago, but just haven't had any spare time." Oh, and in response to my last letter, the visual I had of you guys had me thinking of the kids from The Sandlot, all grown. Love that movie. Anyway, talk to you soon. I feel like that could have been like a cloaked UFO, and it's creating a shadow, but you can't actually see the UFO.
Like a Klingon?
Yeah, like a bird of prey or something like that.
Yeah. I heard a post the other day that said they're making the Klingons Trump supporters in the next Star Trek.
Oh, it's getting political. It's unbelievable. The propaganda in Hollywood. I'm losing my liking for that. Every movie now seems to have some bullshit in there about and it's usually one-sided.
Oh no, it's Todd Macy's filmed some UFOs over London.
Oh wow.
And then they just started then Isaac said military drone, and that's how Isaac got involved, I believe. So
Todd Akabesis was did a couple episodes ago with us, and
wasn't it last episode?
Was it? No, I think it was one before that.
Oh,
I don't know. Anyways, it was a great episode about synchronicities and synchro walks.
It was great. That was just,
that was a fun one.
Ooh, someone was going to check it out.
Yeah.
Someone works just down the road.
Yeah, we have a listener that's going to check it out.
Fuck yeah. Report back.
Yep.
Or you're out of the UK posse. Just kidding. You could become the leader of the UK posse. Actually, whoever goes and busts into that fucking fireplace and solves a Shakespeare mystery becomes the leader of the UK posse.
Yeah.
Which episode was that now? Who was it? That was,
that was going way back. Not way back.
Alan. Alan?
Alan, yeah.
Alan Richard?
No.
Richard Allen?
No.
Well, I'll find it. It's a Shakespeare one. It's a few eps back. I'll put the link in the show notes. It was a good one. It was like it was like a thriller.
Yeah.
Like a mystery thriller.
Yeah. And he went and measured the pyramids.
Yeah.
People ask about him, that we should get in contact with him and see how it went.
Should.
Yeah, we should. Go for it.
Alan Green,
yeah.
You know, he just came out of the blue. Some fucking guy emailed me and was like, you got to have this guy on. Had CC'd him, and it was just like, boom, happened.
Yeah.
I had no idea what we were in.
Yeah, that was great.
And those are the ones where you just sit there with your hair blown back.
That was like a real life caper.
Yeah. What happened next? So anyway, if you listen to that episode, your instructions are in there. But we didn't tell you to do that shit. Don't even mention you listen to the Grimerica show. Delete all episodes of the Grimerica show and destroy your phone before busting open the motherfucker.
Hey, do you want to do a jingle for this? This is Rob from Italy. He's got a email. He's got a UFO experience in there and a little bit of feedback.
Jingle.
Why not?
Okay, how about this?
And now another edition of the Grimerican Goodies by the people. For the people.
Watch the lip
We
syncing,
shouldn't be on. Okay.
Ooh, I know what I could jump into.
Hi there, guys. Right to the point. Am I the first Italian Grimerican show fan? I hope so. What do you think? First Italian? No. We did that great episode on that lake in Italy.
Lake Morte?
Nevi, maybe? Lake Nemi?
Yeah.
Yeah, with that Italian guest. He was good too. That was fun. Okay, I'm listening to the show since a couple months, and I really dig it. I like the fact that you guys...
You are the first Italian to email.
Yeah, that's probably true. I like the fact that you guys are very open-minded and don't fear any type of question or guest. Looking forward to supporting you with the donation and maybe a cool jingle straight from Italy. I wanted to get in touch with you just in case. I'd like to suggest inviting Angel from GreatGizaPyramid.com to the show. The guy's trying to reverse engineer the Pyramid of Giza, and he's pretty positive that the thing wasn't a tomb. Plus, he knows a lot about the code of Karl Monk. And it could be cool to add what Randall Carlson already said on the show.
Well, 99% sure that the fucking Great Pyramid is not a tomb.
Yeah. So what else? Is it Graham, the one tormented by UFO stuff? I'm not obsessed, but I can tell my personal experience. I was with my girlfriend in Austria, and we were drinking during the night. We weren't really drunk, but kind of happy, if you know what I mean. Anyway, it was summer and a very hot one. We went outside, we laid on a hammock and glanced at the stars. The sky was so clear we could see nothing but stars. We immediately saw a dozen of stars. They were just tiny dots to our eyes that were moving and moving fast. They seemed to be fighting and catching each other. They were making curves and sudden stops, and all of these movements that stars don't usually do. They would change pace to a slower one, then accelerate like crazy again. We were stunned. The day after, everyone laughed at us when we told what we saw. They thought we were stone cold drunk, but we saw the whole thing in two. No drugs involved. That's it. That's my only UFO experience. I tried to invite all my friends to listen to the Grimerica show, but most of them don't speak English at all. Keep what you're doing.
Translate that shit.
And have a good one in Canada.
We should get someone to translate the show. I wonder if our dry humor would come across in Japanese or something.
Is it dry?
I think mine is.
Yours is probably dry.
Yeah. Yours is just non-existent.
Thanks, right? I laugh. I've had some good laughs on here.
Yeah, absolutely. One of my best laughs are on the show.
Yeah.
What else you got? That's it.
No, I got another one.
Okay, you do that, and then I'm going to jump into some social media jangle.
We got a C-SETI coming up. C5 this weekend. Probably going to do a sleepover again.
A sleepover?
Out in the forest.
Ooh, it's going to be this weekend?
Yep.
You're sleeping out in the forest
this
weekend?
Why, what's wrong? Is it supposed to be cold?
Let me see. Hey Siri, what's the weather like this weekend?
I know it went from like 30 to 8.
It should be sunny in Chestermere this weekend. Daytime temperatures will start around 15 and will head up to 19, with overnight lows between...
Oh, there's something you don't see in a while. Look, it's rainy every day but the weekend.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
Too bad it's going to fucking snow tomorrow.
Yeah, it's pretty cold all of a sudden.
Yeah, it's snowing.
Anyways, I don't care. I'll just snuggle
up.
up in a blanket, in a sleeping bag and whatever.
That's it.
Just for a few hours.
Yeah.
Apparently the cold's better to sleep in anyways.
Hopefully they'll take the fire ban off.
Yeah. So anyways, going up there this weekend, wish us luck. Okay.
You want me to wish you luck?
Yeah, I was looking for it, but you're too busy.
I'm looking for the jingle.
Okay, so this is a trip report / UFO sighting combo. You ready for it?
Yes.
So Graham, thank you for the show and all the wonderful hours of fascinating content you guys have given me. Here's a trip report with a UFO sighting that I experienced a few days ago. Last Saturday night, I had the welcome opportunity to use cannabis with intent.
Ooh.
Away from many of the day-to-day norms and distractions of my life. At approximately 11:30, I walked down to the shore of the lake at my childhood home under a particularly brilliant night sky. I centered myself, gave thanks, and focused my intent on being present in nature with myself. I smoked most of a cannabis cigarette. I'm a regular smoker, but my typical consumption is not much more than a hit or two a night from a one-hitter device. Done in haste without much intent other than a stress relief or as a creative enhancer. That being said, I am no stranger to the strong effect that cannabis and other entheogens can induce. I observed the stars for a while with focused breath, noticed the beauty of the still lake at night, and just enjoyed the moment, standing alone on the shore.
Well, shore or what?
What?
Shore or what?
He was at his childhood home on the lake.
Oh, I was picturing the ocean for some reason.
Oh, really?
Was it a big lake?
You weren't listening to the initial couple lines.
I'm still trying to find the jingle.
10 to 15 minutes later, I made my way up to the pool, which sits slightly above the lake and offers a beautiful view of the lake and the horizon. All the lights in the house and pool area were dark, and the night sky was unobstructed. I lay in the water and floated my back with focused breath, eyes to the stars, and just melted for a while. I became lost in the breath, near weightlessness, feeling and the beauty of the stars. I played with my buoyancy and its relation to the amount of oxygen I carried, body position, the pace of my breath. I drifted between fully floating on the surface and floating vertical and face down. The transitions between these positions was incredible, and the combination with my elevated state, breath, and the view. If I took more shallow breaths, my lower body would sink and my center of gravity would shift to the center of my chest. I felt like I was flying through space. It was an incredible and unique sensations. I'm not reading this very well. I drifted in this state.
You seem like you need a drink of water. You want some water?
I do, yeah.
Dun, 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 dun.
Probably lost the best spot here. So he felt like he was flying through space.
Hell of a time myself.
It was an incredible and unique sensation. I drifted in this state and continued focused breathing until around 12:15 a.m. when something else amazing happened. I stood up in the water and leaned against the edge of the pool. I relaxed there for a moment while still looking at the horizon. Still mindful, but without focused breath. I noticed a sound to my left coming from the south-southeast. Shortly after, an object comes into view over the lake about 150 yards from me and maybe 150 to 350 feet in the air. I watched it as it passed above a large 100-plus foot tree on a point in the lake, 150 yards from me, traveling from southeast to northwest. My initial thought was that it was a plane en route to landing in a major regional airport about 25 miles northwest from my position. I happened to live in a very close proximity to the airport, and I thought it was heading to, but more on that later. As this object made its way across my field of view, my initial judgment gave way to me repeating, "What the fuck is that?" Until eventually it faded from sight. At first glance, it looked like a large commercial aircraft with typical exterior lighting arrangements. But as I watched it pass, I noticed some very odd things. It was very large, traveling very slow, abnormally loud, but in a way I'm not familiar with. And its exterior lighting was off in a few ways. The lights were very brilliant red, blue, white, burnt orange at the aft end. There were no flashing lights, and the main body moved through my field of view. The aft end became more visible, and at least 2 rows of 3, maybe 4 glowing burnt orange light sources became apparent. These were not traditional navigation or landing lights. They seemed to be the glow from some sort of propulsion. My jaw was on the floor as I watched it fade out of sight. I stood there in disbelief for a few moments and started anchoring the details into my mind. I noticed all the things I relayed above to the best of my ability. The sound it made was a combination of a normal jet-type propulsion, but under low power, combined with a powerful humming, like electric crackling frequency. I'm trying to relate its size to aircraft I'm familiar with, but the best I can do is the largest of commercial aircraft, i.e. a 380 Airbus or a military C-5, which can be quite a sight at low altitude. But I've seen C-5s countless times and even flown aboard one on a few occasions.
Wait, what?
Yeah, he's been on a C-5.
What's a C-5?
That's that big transport plane, that massive one that you see at the air shows all the time.
Okay. I was thinking like a C5. Yeah, exactly. I was like, wait, whoa, this just stepped up.
I feel like the dimensions were pretty different, but I'm comfortable with claiming those as comparable in overall size to what I saw. I want to say the length from nose to the propulsion lift and tail section of the craft was longer than a typical aircraft, and a large percent of the overall bulk of the craft was carried in that aft quarter section. Picture a long cylinder with a large rectangular structure at the back, no apparent wings or lift producing shapes in sight. I don't know how to explain what I saw. I get how he's trying to anchor this in his mind, because that's kind of what happened to me when
you saw your double decahedron?
Yeah, I was like thinking about all the details and just sort of anchoring it in my mind, like trying to just remember it all. Like,
too bad you didn't have an iPhone.
I know. I still wouldn't. It still wouldn't have been
a shitty picture. Yeah. Did you lose your spot?
Yeah. So he says, I still don't know how to explain what I saw. It was a very surreal experience from start to finish, and I stayed up for another hour or so, still reveling in the sighting and overall sense of well-being from the meditation/pool experience. So caveats. I'm by no means an expert on aircraft ID, but I was in the Air Force for 6 years and worked on the flight line in close proximity to many other aircraft. I also live 2.5 miles as a crow flies from an international airport with fairly consistent and heavy traffic. I'd say I'm very familiar with the sight of aircraft flying in close proximity to the ground because I see them landing or taking off pretty much every time I open my front door. I'm also aware of what air traffic looks like from my parents' home where this sighting took place. I've never seen a plane fly so low there. It's mostly cruising altitude with an occasional jet starting its landing approach or still climbing to cruising altitude, but even those are many thousands of feet up. I can't imagine why such a large aircraft would fly so low to the ground 25-ish miles from the airport. As I stand here now at my house typing this report, I'm watching a commercial jet coming into land, and it's easily twice as high as the craft I witnessed. That's the other part.
Jesus, man.
The skeptics want to just say, oh, it must have been a plane or it must have been this and that, something conventional. But when you see planes all the time, you know the difference.
I keep forgetting we're on video too.
What do
You know,
think?
it's funny. That day it was real cloudy. I want to say it was like 3 weeks ago. I don't know if I told you, but I was driving home from the shop and it was a real low cloud. And I was like coming up that Rainbow Road and I seen a fucking plane like dip out of the clouds. And he was like, I don't know if he was like, I was like, holy fuck, I've never seen a plane there before. And I live under a flight path. But it was
A
fucking
flight path?
a flight path. Yeah, they're kind of a flight path. So I see the planes are here. They're pretty low. It's cool. You can watch them. It's kind of loud once in a while, but anyway, I digress. Anyway, I couldn't believe it. This thing's like probably,
What kind of plane?
WestJet.
See, you could even tell what kind of plane
Yeah.
it was. I mean, this is the difference, right?
Yeah. And it just like dipped out of the clouds and was like, whoop, and then back into the clouds. And I never seen it again.
Huh.
For a second, I thought I was going to see a plane crash.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So he says, also want to make a note on the meditation and breathing work I was doing in the pool.
Hey, did you bring the paintings?
No, I didn't.
Come
I'm going
on.
to interrupt the last part of the story
Sorry.
here. It was very incredible and unique experience for me. I've had a handful of float tank, like sensory deprivation sessions, and despite the difference in some of the unique conditions you experience in the tank, floating in a pool like this, alone with the night sky displayed it all in glory, was amazing and not to be discounted. Next time I get in the tank, I will for sure be doing some breath work. Thanks again for an amazing show. Peace.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, that's from Kent.
Thanks, Kent.
Yeah, that was it.
Okay, there we go.
Jeez.
We had the new moon, dark sky, which is great.
What are you doing?
Had a planned camping.
Closing out the segment.
Went back there
Oh, yeah.
for the night. Crystal clear. Darkest night. Decided to read that meditation, did the singing bowl, and that shit starts happening. Pow, pow, pow. We started seeing flash bulbs.
Okay. Okay.
Streakers coming down. Great Dunlop.
Okay, that's enough. That's enough. Come on. Take my last name out of there. That's just a bit too much.
I say your name every episode.
I know, but that's different.
Is it?
Yeah.
I
It's
just
re- I
love
don't
it.
know.
It's like the greatest thing ever.
So anyways, we should do our support spiel, right?
Oh yeah. Okay, you do it.
Well, the best way to support the show, because we have no ads, no sponsors or affiliates or anything like that, is to donate any amount.
Any amount. The best way to support the show is just sign up for a monthly recurring amount, which you can do at grimerica.ca/support. You got everything there from $1 a month to $30 a month.
But any amount will get you the black budget
Any
support
amount,
feed,
even a one-time donation.
which is extra content.
Yeah. I don't enjoy sending out the feed. If you do like a one-time donation of $2, it really like irks me. But yeah.
So, okay, let's talk about this. This is the process. You donate anything, and then Darren
Don't point
actually
at me.
manually writes you an email
Yes.
with a link.
They're
to
literally
the-
a two-man operation. Plus, actually, that's not true.
so it's
We've got a
nothing
lot of friends
automated
that
here or
help.
anything like that. So if
No,
you
there's
don't
no
get an
automation.
email that day, at some point, like it's not going to come right away. It's whenever Darren gets around to it. Just if you don't get it, you got to tell us and email us, and we'll make sure you get it. 'cause
Yeah, if you don't
I'm sure
get it
Darren
within-
forgets sometimes.
you
He
don't-
doesn't even read my emails at all, so I can't imagine how he's managing this process.
If you don't get, I think I've got everybody. If you're a subscriber or a donator and you don't have it, then let me know. And if you do sign up for a monthly or do a donation and you don't get it within like 3 days, you could email me.
Yeah.
Don't feel like you're bugging me.
Yeah.
Because I might like be halfway through it and something happens, or I mean to do it and then it just happens. I think I get everybody, but who knows? We're only a two-man operation here with some help from
Yeah, we get lots of
outside
help, yeah.
but all that stuff is two-man.
Yeah. It's all volunteer help.
Exactly. Thanks for volunteering, motherfuckers.
Bingo, bango, social media
What are you doing?
jingle. Don't forget
Well, I thought we had more time left than we do.
subscribe to the Grimerica.
So I'm going to plow through a couple of these and then we're going to cut it off
Yeah, I guess so, yeah.
because we've got an interview starting.
We're running out of time here.
We've got an interview starting in 4 minutes.
Yeah.
Don't forget to rate, comment, and or
Time flies in the igloo.
Yeah. It's next level. Okay, we've got 9/11 was an inside joke by David Rockefeller in the Pentagon. The Decashido. Great show as always. I like the as always. That's a shot at me. I don't even try to talk to people at 9/11 or any other event. I just tell them to watch Wag the Dog.
Oh, yeah.
Craig Fowler's.
I'm going to put that in the show notes because people will forget.
I like the radio thing of the first episodes. That was cool. My fuck! Now you're affecting me. You're infecting me.
Well, it's from your strawberry cough stuff or whatever you're doing. That's why you can't have that kind of stuff in the studio. Like you really
green crack wax.
Is that what it is?
Yeah.
See, I mean, it's Jesus. And I'm not even partaking. I can feel the dryness in my throat.
We got Natolis. Sorry, but this guy is a shill disinformation agent. I have followed the 9/11 thing for years, and this guy's a waste of time. If I could recommend the work of Dr. Judy Wood, the towers were turned to a fine powder in midair. Follow the trail back, and you realize that they designed and built the towers, the Illuminati, had this event planned in 2001, and the towers were built with the advanced technology built into the design. There is no rubble pile, fake planes, or TV trickery. There is no way the end of a plane wing could go through the steel box section. 12-foot tall people hanging out of windows. And he gives a bunch of links there. And then they start arguing. I don't, I do. We got the book right there. Our book came in today. I've been turned on to Judy Wood's work for a couple of years.
That's actually kind of what turned you around.
That's what really got me onto it. But, you need these guys too. You're not going to get architects and engineers, I don't think, to go that far. Maybe they think that far, but they're not going to go on the record and say, I think it was fucking crazy technology that doesn't exist.
Yeah.
Allegedly doesn't exist. And I'm on board with Judy Wood stuff. Just paid $100 for the book.
Yeah.
And we're going to have her on, but I still think, maybe if these, my thought is even if these guys do believe that, they're not going to come out and say it. You could easily destroy your career.
Yeah, I agree.
From our old buddy, Bill Anderson, this is going to be the last one. We'll do a longer segment next week because we've got an interview starting in about 90 seconds. From our good old shill Bill. Direct from the chats. The neighbor behind me works for an American Institute of Architects. He coordinates their meetings and conventions. He's a total creep. I have a barbecue and play music after dusk. He starts flashing his yard lights. You would think doing that kind of convention work, he would at least be out of town every so often. Nope. Always there. Young daughter of the other neighbor tries to practice violin in the yard during the weekend. He is bitching and yelling over the fence. She isn't real good at violin, but Jesus. And Joe Marr replied, well, you know what they say, Bill, you can't pick your neighbors. This should always be regarded as law as opposed to a theory or opinion. I have been able to find no way around it. You find the perfect abode and some person will come along and put a fly in your soup. The next time I find a house I'd like to buy, I will sit outside of my car like a creep just to monitor flight traffic. But until they invent an asshole detector, I doubt I'd be able to spot a bad neighbor. And we got our buddy Coop says, bless up, guys. I don't quite know what that means, but I like it. Hey,
thanks, everybody.
Speaking of that, Coop's in the chat doing his fucking peace emojis again. Hey, Coop. Hey, guys, thanks for tuning in. We're going to fucking bounce so we can get into this interview.
Yeah.
And, enjoy the chat with
Jacques Vallee.
The one and only Dr. Jacques. Is he a doctor?
And Red Pill Junkie.
You doctor?
I don't think so. All right, tonight we have a special episode. We've got Dr. Jacques Vallee with us. He's a legend in the field of UFOs and ufology for decades now. I'm really looking forward to chatting with him about what's new and how things have changed over the past few years. And we've also got Red Pill Junkie with us to help us out. So welcome to the show, Jacques. Dr. Jacques, how are you doing?
Very good. Good to hear your voice.
Yeah, thanks. We heard your episode on Skeptical there with Alex Sakaris. It was fascinating, and we really wanted to get you on the show. And the first thing I wanted to kind of pick your brain about, because I've been listening to Keel's essays on UFOs going back to the 60s, and I felt like so much was going on back then, and here we are 50 years later, and in some ways you could say that we really haven't made a lot of progress. I mean, some of the theories that you guys had back then were, they're still valid today, and we haven't really seen a lot of change. I mean, would you agree with that? No, and maybe it's an optical illusion on my part that things are changing because, there are new people in the field. Yeah, there are new techniques for research. Among them, what we're using now, namely the internet. Yep. Which wasn't there at the time. So we can talk about that, especially for something that has kept me very busy the last few years, which is looking at the sightings and phenomena in antiquity, or at least until the Industrial Revolution, which we can now do things that we just couldn't get to in terms of the knowledge and so on before the internet. John Keel was a complex personality. At the time, of course, he initiated the idea of ultra-terrestrials as opposed to extraterrestrials. Right. And in that theory, we were very close. In fact, he was mad at me when I wrote one of my books, especially Invisible College, because he was coming out with his own book. And he felt that I was copying him. And, of course, there was no way I could have copied him. I was on a different track. But we were really going in parallel directions and going beyond the idea of just ET, spacecraft, and so on. Because by then, I'm talking about the mid to late 70s, it was already clear that what the witnesses were describing wasn't a spacecraft, that it was something much more complex and in some ways much more interesting. So that was my, and then after that we became friends. That's good. Red?
Dr. Vallee, first of all, it's a real honor joining my Grimerica friends in this interview with you. I wanted to mention how last week was the 40th anniversary of Close Encounters of the Third Kind, which obviously is like a, seminal movie, and that really brought the idea of UFOs to the masses. And we know that you, one of the characters was kind of loosely based on you, Lacombe, and that you also consulted to Speilberg in the movie. In fact, you were trying to discuss with him, how UFOs are not necessarily extraterrestrial craft, but he was kind of like going in the way of, ETs is what the people want because it's what they expect. It's easy to understand, so I'm going with that. Now, fast forward 40 years later, we see how, the popular culture and sci-fi have actually begin to entertain fringier or more exotic ideas for the UFO phenomenon. We have movies like, Interstellar, Arrival, even one of Spielberg's own movies, Indiana Jones and the Crystal Skull, in which they show the aliens as interdimensional beings. So seeing that from your position, are you excited about the fact that, popular culture is starting to get away from the idea of the UFOs equating them as extraterrestrial craft?
the Crystal Skull, the production company had bought the rights to a novel that I had written initially in French and then translated into English. And that idea of a multidimensional escape of the UFO, at the end, the object is, the saucer is inside a cave, and they think, of course, it's going to stay inside the cave. And in the novel, the saucer goes into another dimensions and goes away from the cave. So that imagery came from that novel, and that was a lot of fun. I think the movie that would really show what a multidimensional object would look like and the effects it would have on its environment hasn't been made yet. As great as Steven Spielberg's contributions have been. But he was right. In Close Encounters, people would not have understood that at the time because before Close Encounters, all the UFO movies essentially had the same template. Good people in the country are moving around and they see a light, and the light turns into this saucer, and this saucer lands, and it starts, of course, scaring people, and then you call the police, and the police gets blown away, and so you call the Air Force, and the Air Force gets blown away, and then you call the Army, and they arrive with 100 tanks, and they start firing at the saucer and so on. And that was always the model. And Spielberg was the first one who said, look, what people are describing mostly are lights, not so much hardware, and certainly not hardware that looks like our hardware. They don't describe rockets. And it was, Close Encounters was the first movie where he showed both the extraordinary light phenomena that surround the phenomenon, and also the impact on the consciousness of the people. The psychic impact with Roy Neary starting to try to shape, to sculpt things that turn out to be a model for the place where the saucer is going to land eventually. But my only contribution, that character initially was going to be an American, and then Spielberg turned it into a Frenchman. And he told me that we had lunch a couple of times. I was never actually a consultant for the movie. Dr. Hynek was a consultant for the movie. I met with Mr. Spielberg twice for lunch, brought together by a journalist who wrote an article about our interaction, and asked him who the character was based on, and Mr. Spielberg said it was based on me because as a teenager he had read my earlier books. I wrote a couple of books in the 60s, Anatomy of a Phenomenon and then Challenge to Science, that interested him, and he said that he had actually, based on his interest at the time, he had made a little movie in 16 millimeter with a 16 millimeter camera about UFOs already in those days, and that his interest came from that. I think he wanted a character who was alien. If you can call me an alien. At the time, I was certainly a foreigner coming from France, so I was from a different culture, and he wanted to show the cultural differences between, the Pentagon people running around trying to find out where the big saucer was going to land, and this French character who kept saying that it was a sociological phenomenon, and that's where the dynamics came from for that character.
Huh, that's interesting.
And it was a lot of fun.
Yeah. Huh.
Oh, sorry. And of course, we're talking about how in the movie there is the idea of showing the phenomenon having such an impact in the consciousness of the witnesses. And there are also other deeply transformative experiences that are still a deep challenge to science. We have near-death experiences, and we have psychedelic experiences, and we have like the experiments that Dr. Rick Strassman conducted in New Mexico, interestingly enough, in New Mexico, with DMT. I don't know if you are interested in that, in the sense that there are some people in the field who are advocating for having a unified field theory of the paranormal, trying to link all of these seemingly different phenomena, I don't know, ghosts, psychic phenomena, UFOs, even cryptid sightings, into one kind of like common theory. Some people are still fighting about that and trying to keep the field separated, but what is your opinion about it?
Well, I'm not in a position to tell them what to do. I mean, everybody has a right to experiment and to pursue. I mean, it's such a huge field and a big challenge. Everybody is welcome. DMT and ayahuasca and drugs in general, I've never taken any drugs. I tried to smoke once, and it didn't work. So, tobacco. So, I'm not an expert in any way. My opinion with that, I have nothing wrong with, people who want to explore that, of course. Certainly there are many traditions that draw their inspiration and their knowledge from, including American Indian traditions and Middle Eastern traditions, and maybe even early Christianity, that drew their inspiration from psychedelics and other forms of altering consciousness, altering drugs. My own feeling is that as a scientist, my brain is pretty limited as it is, and I really don't feel that I should mess with it, hoping to, discover something else. I'm quite happy to try to improve the little brain I've got. But be that as it may, I had very interesting discussions with Terrance McKenna, who, of course, was an authority on DMT and so on. And we were on a panel once, and we had discussions outside the panel where he told me about what people were describing. And those are very powerful experiences of something. My problem with it is that in science, if you go on an exploration, you discover something, you want to be able to get back to the same place again. And my problem with much of the drug experience is that it seems to be a different experience every time. And so it is a form of exploration. I don't argue against that, but it's not calibrated. And everything in science, and I try to approach this as a scientist, in a fairly rigorous, sober fashion, because that's what I can contribute. Other people can contribute other things. And so I've tried to follow that pretty, religiously. And so in science, when you use an instrument, you have to calibrate it before and after the experiment. You don't just go into the field and read out what you measure without knowing that your calibration is right and your instrument is actually measuring what you think it's measuring.
Yeah.
So in what I've done, I've always tried to do that. Of course, with this phenomenon, you can't always do that because you're swept away by what the witnesses are describing and the variety of experiences they have, and that's what you have to deal with. But I still try to apply, that rule. And that's why I don't think you can mix up ghosts and religious experiences, and you can certainly draw inspiration from it. For example, I've written about Fatima and about other, Marian apparitions, but I've done that because the actual phenomena, when you strip away the belief system of what people believed they were seeing, of course they thought they were seeing the Virgin Mary, or a manifestation that came from the Virgin Mary. But so I respect that, and I put it aside, but what they are describing is a light and a disk and heat effects and color effects and all of that, which I can recognize as the same kinds of physical effects that people are describing in UFO cases. So that's where I think you can draw those parallels.
Well, talking about Fatima, for example, it brings the question of just how powerful is the phenomenon. We have this experience of the phenomenon that starts with 3 little children that starts to have interaction with something, and they tell their parents, and words gets around in their village, and more people start to gather around in that place, Cova area in Portugal in 1917, and they start to corroborate that something indeed is happening, and it seems to be like there's a certain build-up between the amount of energy that the phenomenon manifests and the amount of people that is gathered, to the point that we have the final conclusion or climax of the event on October the 13th, 1917, when there were already around 5,000 people gathered there, and they all witnessed the so-called miracle of the sun, according to the Catholic Church. And there were people of all walks of life. There were even people who weren't there because they were believers, but because they wanted to actually mock the believers. There were skeptics, there were atheists, and they all saw something, not necessarily the same thing, but they saw something. So could we interpret this build-up as something that the phenomenon needs in order to manifest into a reality?
I don't know. The phenomenon seems to be quite capable of manifesting anytime, any place it likes.
Yeah.
Including in the middle of the deployment of the American Pacific Fleet a few years ago in 2004. So I don't think it needs, but it seems to, again, it's a human interpretation here, but it seems to use the beliefs and the consciousness of the witnesses in shaping its manifestations. And I'm not the only one saying that. I mean, several people have originated that theory of sort of mimicry, where the phenomenon seems to draw imagery, including in the Betty and Barney Hill case, and so on, to draw its imagery and its manifestation and its display. Professor Frank Salisbury wrote a book called The Great Utah UFO Display, because the phenomenon isn't just happening, it's displaying itself at the right time in front of witnesses that it seems to have chosen. And that's a very complex aspect of it. And it makes it, of course, scientifically, makes it very, very difficult to study. Now, you mentioned Fatima. There is a very intriguing parallel between Fatima and the Virgin of Guadalupe in Mexico, also, which is, to me, is an extraordinary, mix of probably some hoaxes on the part of the clergy, but also, a genuine phenomenon. And certainly the sociological phenomenon is there. I mean, you had 6 million Indians converted to Catholicism after after that was revealed. But there was a single witness.
Wow.
There was a single witness, but he brought back, unbeknownst to him, he brought back an image on his tilma, on his vestment, on his jacket, essentially. That was an image that was so powerful that it forced the attention of everybody in the palace of the bishop, and started this mass conversion. Fatima, what bothers me about Fatima is that when people talk about Fatima, they talk, and they're right. I mean, they talk about the big miracle in 1917. Now, wind back the tape, and you go back to 2 years before, 1915. There are 3 little shepherds who are tending the sheep and the goats, and when it rains, they go into a cave. Not the same cave, not the Covale area, but another cave, and they see a light. And inside that light is a human form, which is bright, that they call the angel. And the angel starts talking to them. And the angel says that he is the angel of peace. Mm-hmm. And he never comes out of the light, but they see this entity of light inside this globe of light. And they go into a sort of trance where they lose all energy. Mm-hmm. They are, any sense of energy is drawn out of them, and he gives them a prayer that they repeat, they just keep repeating this prayer, and that lasts for hours. And then after that, the light disappears and so on. And so that was already known in the area, but, it was just one of those things that only happened to these 3 kids. I mean, they were, between 12 and 15, something like that. And then 2 years pass, and then in May 13th, 1917, the thing happened at the Covada area at Fatima. Mm-hmm. And I've been to Fatima. There is no... the site has been paved over so that hundreds of buses come there when big celebrations. So it's essentially one huge parking lot around a big cathedral, which isn't very pretty. I mean, it's really a mass manifestation, of the church, and it has lost the beautiful story of these 3 shepherds. But then, at the beginning, there is just 3 shepherds, and then the next month, again on the 13th, there is 17 or 20 people, and then at the end, after, by the way, the shepherds have been put in jail one month, because remember, Portugal had a socialist government. The church, the last thing the church wanted was a miracle. I mean, they really didn't want the Virgin to show up. That was, politically, this was really a bad timing. There was the communist revolution going on in Russia. I mean, we all know what happened in Russia in October 1917, was Lenin and the communist revolution. Mm-hmm. And then that is a time that the Virgin picks to show up, and it wasn't 5,000 people in October; it was 70,000 people, and there was a cordon of police and army trying to stop the people from gathering, because again, the government didn't want this, and the church didn't want this. So the phenomenon, certainly from a sociological and socio-political point of view, was extraordinary. Mm-hmm. That the phenomenon, sort of imposed itself on top of both the government and the church. And then everybody saw the sun spinning around and all the colors. There was a professor of physics from Coimbra University who described it as monochromatic sectors rotating in the sky. I mean, meaning sectors of a single color, blue and pink and yellow and green and so on, spinning around where the sun should have been. And people who were a little bit off from the crowd saw the sun and they saw a disk. They saw two things. The people in the crowd saw only sort of a gray disk on top of the sun. There have been several interpretations of that, including optical illusion. I mean, if you stare at the sun thinking that is going to be a miracle, your eyes are going to be damaged and your vision is going to be unreliable. You're going to start seeing colors. So people have argued that's what it was. Only the shepherds heard a voice or perceived something, and only Maria said that she saw the apparition. And then she spent the rest of her life in a monastery. And, that was the story. But to me...
The problem is that an optical illusion cannot, dry the clothes of all the people who were, on a storm, before that.
No, I agree. To me, I think the sightings, the reports from 1915 are very interesting because they are authentic. I mean, they are not considered as part of the miracle by the church. The church hardly mentions it as just in passing. And most of the books about Fatima don't mention it at all. To me, those are the three kids that I'd like to go interview because they saw something and they had this extraordinary effect of sort of not quite falling asleep, but being driven into this state where they couldn't think, they couldn't move, they were just repeating this prayer mechanically. And they never said it was the Virgin Mary. They said they saw, what else do you expect? They are going to say they saw an angel because they saw this luminous creature. So enough about Fatima, but to me, that was really what fascinated me, still does, about this. The other thing that fascinates me is if it's the Virgin, she works according to a human calendar because she showed up always on the 13th of the month. So how does that happen?
Yeah, very interesting. So switching topics a little bit to the kind of more on the ETH type vein. I mean, I wanted to get your opinion on this. So, I think this is one thing that's changed. Like, we used to have the contactees way back when, but now there's a movement and even just putting aside the organizations and the personalities involved in some of this, but a movement of people making conscious contact with something, meditating and getting together in groups and going out. I mean, there's hundreds of them in one organization and a bunch more in another organization. So how do you reconcile that? I mean, it's pretty easy for people to stick with the ETH when they go out and try and make contact and they see stuff. I mean, like the other night we were out, and I'll be going out again on Saturday, but there was just 6 of us, but we definitely saw anomalous lights and flash bulbs and all kinds of different stuff going on. How do you reconcile that with the research that you're doing, and does that interest you at all? And then on the other side, what should we do as a group maybe to better document, or we talked about, measurements and calibrations. I mean, it's very hard to do that. I mean, you can test, you can try doing the same thing, the same meditations, the same type of, the same people, the same location, the same lunar calendar, that kind of stuff. I mean, I guess that's part, but is there any other things you would suggest?
It's a very tough question. As you know, there are a number of sites that have been claimed to be sites where people see things frequently.
Right.
And I I don't mean sites where there is a known optical phenomenon of headlights in the distance creating mirages and so on. I mean, mirage is not a hallucination; it's a real optical phenomenon.
Yeah,
but it's repeatable. But there have been a number of places, especially around the U.S., where things have been seen repeatedly, and some of those sites have been instrumented.
Mm-hmm.
Well, but we don't have, we don't have the documentation that we thought we would get out of that instrumentation. So you can put video cameras, you can put infrared cameras, you can put all of that, and yeah, you're going to get something, but we're not getting what we thought we would be getting. For one thing, we don't get the proof, and we don't get the kind of craft that people have been describing. You get lights, but you go into the countryside in the middle of the night, and you're going to see lights, and lights are a dime a dozen. So how do you know exactly how far it was? Lots of things in the sky these days that may or may not be
ET
advertised. Drug enforcement aircraft and satellites and all kinds of other things.
Drones. I mean, there's all kinds of, and then there's the military craft as well. Who knows what's out there for that? So I mean, I'm not saying that all these sightings are ET, but it's an interesting thing that might be able to be studied a bit more.
Yes, and there have been documented cases where people either meditating or asking for a manifestation, and there was a manifestation. So I'm not denying that. I don't know how to bring it into the scientific framework. That's all I'm saying. So you were asking at the beginning, what's new, and I think a number of things are new. First, of course, we've got the internet, and so we can go back and document things a lot better than was true before. Of course, we also get a lot more junk. So you're putting more power into the channel. You're going to get more signal and more noise, and then it's left as an exercise to you to try to tell the signal from the noise. That's hard to do, but we've published, with Chris Aubeck in Spain. We've been working on a book that we called Wonders in the Sky, and we've done that book twice actually. The first time we narrowed it to 500 cases before 1880. Now, before 1880, you don't have many things in the sky. You don't have. You may have a few balloons once in a while. Those were free balloons. You don't have dirigibles. You certainly don't have airplanes. And you certainly don't have rockets and things like that. So you have something that's fairly pure, and we've gone back to antiquity. And, I'm amused when skeptics, like some of the people at City, say, well, there was nothing in antiquity that resembling this phenomenon, so the phenomenon must be a new thing, and it's probably a bunch of hoaxes and so on. Well, I'm sorry, but many of the cases that we found in the writings of Roman historians like Cicero and others that came from the archives of the Roman Empire. The consuls there was a whole period in the Roman Empire when it was run by 3 consuls. It was run by a consulate. And they were extremely interested in the things that people saw in the sky because for astrological reasons, they thought that patterns of unknown things in the sky would be indicative of historical events that were going to happen. In other words, they were portents of historical events. the death of a king or new war or a famine or floods or things like that. So they made a rule that anything that was unusual in the sky had to be reported to Rome. So it's like, the President of the United States saying, I want the Air Force to give me a report on my desk every 3 months on all the UFOs seen in the sky. And those were, they were not kidding. Those were official records of the Roman Empire. We don't have all of them because many of them have been lost, but we have, dozens of them. And the Roman historians, like Herodotus and Cicero and other great writers, reprinted them and included them in their books, and we have those books. And they have been translated, and they are available. And, of course, many of the phenomena were things that we understand today. They were meteors, they were comets, they were, globular lightning, they were things that... But there were also cases that that were described carefully. Remember, they were described for the triumvirate in Rome. So this was not just some local, local Roman newspaper. This was, official record of the empire. And so we have a good description, and it matches what we have today as UFO reports. So we started from that, and then we went across to, the 16th, 17th century, 18th century. In the 18th century, you start having a lot of reports from astronomers, astronomers whose names we remember today. And again, those records, you cannot say that that was hoaxes and hallucinations. So we have hundreds of those, and we've covered them in this book. And the patterns are the same patterns that we have from the reports from the U.S. Air Force and from modern UFO reports. So that is new because there were books before about UFOs in antiquity, but they did not have access to that caliber of reports because a lot of this is, you find today on the internet. And, you find it not because of ufologists, but you find it because archivists and librarians and historians have been scanning those records and putting them online. So those you find it in archives of universities and big libraries, museums in Austria and in Germany and so on, very often with drawings. Now, the drawings were not made at the time. They were not made, by the Romans, but they were made in the 17th or 18th century by people who had already gone through those records. And that's very rich, very interesting research, and I'd love to, if I had more time, love to extend it to now the late 19th century and the early 20th century.
So there's enough there for you to keep going on that?
Oh yes, Chris Aubeck and other people like Jerry Clark and others have looked at the records, for example, of the airship sightings just in the 20 years between 1880 and 1900. There are 10,000 newspaper reports of airships. So, that would boil down, and there were many hoaxes also. So you'd have to go back and see if the witnesses really existed. And so, there's a lot of research to be done, but there are certainly hundreds of valid reports, in addition to all the fancy reports.
That's amazing. So that's good to hear. There's lots of that. I didn't realize it was so, there was that much stuff getting put on the internet from the old archives. That's good. So what about the physical evidence you guys are looking at as well?
So there is three kinds of of physical evidence, of physical, let's say, physical samples.
Okay.
One kind is the implants. And, we could spend another hour on the implants.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not an expert on that. I was very skeptical of it. When Mr. Bigelow had the institute, the NIDS, National Investigation Institute, we looked at about a dozen claims of implants from Dr. Lear and others who brought that to the labs. I was frankly skeptical of that because dermatologists tell us that they find all kinds of things coming out of the skin of people who come to them, and very often they've forgotten that when they were a kid, they stepped on something, and that something broke. It may have been a nail or a piece of wire, and it gets into the body. It gets encapsulated. The body takes care of it, encapsulates it in some way, and moves it around, and then it comes out 20 years later, and it looks like a strange object. And I mean, all the dermatologists know that because people go to them and they extract it, and so I thought maybe that's what it is. I mean, I'm not a doctor, and since then I've changed my mind because some of those things from Dr. Lear and others, do have strange composition, and some of them couldn't be matched. But I'm not an expert in that. I don't know. I wouldn't know where to start if somebody came to me with something like that. But I would send them to a dermatologist. So I'm not really studying that. I shouldn't be studying that. There are two other things. There are, at the other end, claims of things that have crashed, like, Roswell. So I've heard all the stories you've heard about Roswell. And I've sort of given up because there are so many contradictions and so on. But there are other crashes that are less publicized than Roswell and are just as rich and interesting, except that the story usually ends with, some people in uniform coming in with a big truck and, taking it somewhere and giving some fancy explanation to the witnesses and telling them not to talk about it. Well, of course, the witnesses are going to talk about it sooner or later, and but I don't have the evidence. I don't have the sample to study.
Yeah.
However, there are other things that I have, where I have some of the evidence, and other people do, and we've started trying to share it, of things that I call ejecta. I mean, things that have been ejected by an object. And very often in conditions where we know the witnesses and we have, we believe witnesses are telling the truth. What usually happens is somebody sees a disk flying around, and it seems to be in deep trouble. It's oscillating and seems about to blow up. And then other objects come close to it, seem to stabilize it. Some metal gets ejected, and it's in fusion state. It falls on the ground, and it's too hot to touch, but eventually it cools down. The disk is stable now, and everything flies away. And what you're left with this metal that's been flowing, and becoming solid on the ground. People pick it up, and they take it to a factory next door, and they take it to a lab or to a university, and it's some sort of metal, some sort of alloy of different metals, and very often it looks like, some industrial materials. So they're told, well, it doesn't look really strange, and, you do what you want with it. And people keep it as, in an envelope, they put it in a drawer, and they forget it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we have some of those. There is a celebrated case in Brazil at Ubatuba that apparently there's some question about the date, but I think it happened in 1957, and there was quite a bit of material and it has been preserved. It was studied by Professor Sturrock at Stanford University. The material seems to be very pure magnesium. Now, there is no such thing as 100% pure magnesium because it would ignite and burn in contact with the air, with the oxygen in the air. So the magnesium that we have is protected by oxide, but essentially it's very, very pure. It's purer than the standard of magnesium. On the other hand, you can buy the standard of magnesium and you can refine it further if you want to, for in a lab or in a big industrial factory, for example, for aerospace applications. So maybe that's what it is, but it doesn't seem to have the same isotope ratios as ordinary magnesium. So we continue to look at that. I was in... So there is a colorful history to those samples. APRO, the Lorenzen UFO research group, in the late 50s, got some of those samples from a very reliable investigator named Dr. Fontes, who was an MD in Brazil. And I actually knew Dr. Fontes. He came from Chicago, and I spent a day with him. And he gave me some of his records. Dr. Fontes had some samples that he gave to APRO, and the U.S. Air Force said, we'd like to test it. So they gave us a sample. Those were microscopic. I mean, it was very, very small quantities of it. And the Air Force blew it up and trying to test it. So they went back to the Lorenzen, and they said, can we have another one because we blew up the one you gave us? And the Lorenzens wisely said, we don't think we should give you another sample because you blew up the first one. But they gave a couple of the samples to Dr. Sturrock, and those were studied under good conditions by different labs, including a French lab who studied the isotopes. And it does look strange. One of the isotopes seems to be in a higher quantity than it should. On the other hand, if it comes from space, the isotope ratios in meteorites are different from the isotope ratios of metals on Earth, which is not a natural phenomenon. So, there is some argument about that, but there is very, very little of that material. Now, I was in Argentina 6 months ago on another case, and I saw two fairly large samples, the size of a walnut, which is pretty large. I mean, we don't need that much material to do an isotope analysis. And the people in Argentina were kind enough to give me part of that. So we are going to be redoing those experiments that Dr. Sturrock did, and we'll have, because we have plenty of material. And we're ready to share it with anybody who wants to. I mean, this is the kind of thing where this should be a real science, where you share the material and the results with your colleagues, wherever they are. So I'm trying to find another French lab that would be willing to share the material with us and redo the same experiments.
Are you hopeful? Are you hopeful that will eventually show? And I mean, I know you can't really speculate on it, but that'll eventually show that something is not natural from outer space. Like even can you look at old like out of place artifacts and some of those things as well through isotopic?
Yes. So we're not ready to publish anything because this is just preliminary. But in Silicon Valley, where I am, those instruments are available. I mean, those the instruments you use are mass spectrographers, and they are very busy. I mean, those are expensive instruments that cost about $7 million, and people are busy with them, especially geologists and people who study meteorites. And of course, they find isotope ratios that are different from Earth, and those are extraterrestrial. Those meteorites come from the other end of the solar system, and they crash on Earth, and so you have a standard there for what's the kind of ratios that are found in science. But those are geologists, and they use those instruments 24 hours a day. So, but there are other newer instruments that we have access to. So, and that's what we find. So to jump to the punchline, we find something that is very curious. We thought we would find either that those were terrestrial ratios, and there is nothing wrong with that, even in a UFO context. I mean, they could be using terrestrial materials as fuel or whatever. Or we would find extraterrestrial ratios. In other words, ratios that would differ by 5% or maybe 10% from terrestrial ratios. We find something that's very weird, that is neither terrestrial nor extraterrestrial. We find evidence of things that have been re-engineered, where the isotopes have been re-engineered.
Wow.
For example, there is one element that has 5 known isotopes in different frequency, different abundance. And in the sample we've got, 2 of the isotopes are not present, and the other 3 are present at 33%, 33%, and 33%. Now, the only thing that can happen is if somebody has separated the isotopes and then reintroduced them into an alloy for some reason that we can't fathom what that reason would be. Especially if it comes from 1947. Because in 1947, we were doing isotope separation on uranium, 235, 237, and so on, to build the bomb. But those were the only, and that was, that was very expensive. It was super secret. It was very difficult. It was, and there was a race to do it before the Germans could do it and, produce the bomb, which we did. So, but nobody was doing that with, ordinary metals. I mean, that would be crazy. That would be, billions of dollars if you wanted to do that. Even today, I mean, that would be an expensive proposition if you wanted to do more than a few grams of it. So we're stuck with that. So again, this is very preliminary. We're not ready to publish it. There could be mistakes somewhere. There could be something wrong with the instrument, although we don't think so. But we need to redo it. And that's one thing that, the witnesses have, come up with something that fell in their backyard, and they say, how come you haven't analyzed my stuff yet? And the answer is, yes, they're right, but the answer is that it's difficult to do. You have to have access to a lab, and then one analysis isn't good. You need to do several, probably in several labs, if you want to get to the trace elements. I mean, you can say, it's magnesium with iron and, and zinc, so what? But if you really want to do it in sufficient detail, unless it's just a common, alloy, you need to do it with several labs, several instruments, and certainly when you get to the isotopes, you need to redo it several times because the one isotope can be masking another, depending on the technology you use. And again, those are difficult. It's difficult to get access to those instruments because they're expensive, and the people who want them want to be paid, and those instruments are used 24 hours a day by scientists. So you need. But things are getting better because there are new instruments that are less expensive, easier to use. And in Silicon Valley, we have access to the people who actually invent those instruments. So when something weird shows up, we can really drill down into what's happening, and that's what we plan to do. And I'm not an expert in that, but I've gathered. I've been going around the world trying to gather those samples, and people are very generous in sharing those samples. I'm sorry to say, except for some UFO groups who have samples and are keeping them as relics. Someday they are going to build a basilica, and they will be saying prayers to those relics. So they don't, and all I need is really the head of a pin. I don't need the rest of it, and I'll return the head of a pin, to them. So this is not a secret operation, that we're going to take it to the CIA. I think this will be done in normal, science labs and company labs, and we'll publish what we. In fact, we've already sort of pre-published what we found so far, and that place in Argentina was very generous in giving us, and we have a trail of evidence, of the data and so on, so we know where it comes from, we know who handled it and how, and all that is open. And again, if some lab in Poland wants to test it, we'll send them the thing by FedEx. I mean, there's no great secrecy and no great we're not going to sell it on eBay for $1 million. I mean, this is anybody can have. We have enough of it.
So Dr. Vallee, correct me if I'm wrong. I know right now I'm going to be highly speculative on a work that you're still, analyzing. But could it be that what these samples, the results that you guys are getting, is that we are dealing with an agency that is not only capable of manipulating the space-time continuum the way that yourself and other researchers have documented plentifully in many cases, but that is also capable of transforming energy into matter and vice versa?
Oh, yes. I think that, most of us were working on this. I cannot speak for other people, but I think the answer you would be getting today is yes.
Okay.
And, 10 years ago, people would have said maybe, but we're way past the maybe stage. And by the way, that could be why the cover-up is being maintained, because the cover-up, made sense in the 50s because everybody thought, oh, goody, we're going to find some secret of propulsion before the Russians, But we know the Russians have been doing the same study, and they've come up against the same things. So maybe it's time to, but if those things are opened up, the public is going to demand. We've been paying for all this stuff as taxpayers. Tell us what it is and what it does, and there may not be an answer. Because if, I have to assume that there are scientists in the government who've been looking at this. In fact, I know there are scientists in the government because I've spoken to some of them. And they haven't violated any great, secrecy. I mean, they wouldn't. But they've shared their puzzlement about what the state, of their research. And if they must have found the same thing we're finding, maybe 10 years for us, and there is no answer to that. I mean, how do you do that? And why? I mean, why would you separate the isotopes of a common metal and re-engineer that metal to create this kind of crazy alloy? But there is no question that's what we're finding. And there is no pattern. So, I'm in Silicon Valley. I know, I've been in Silicon Valley in, several dozens of years. I've financed a number of high-tech companies. I have access to those people. They trust me. One of the luminaries of Silicon Valley, a physicist, was involved in the early semiconductor breakthroughs in Silicon Valley, told me, look, Jacques, suppose you test one of those things and you find 10 features that are completely novel in physics. How do you know which one is significant? Unless the thing, starts levitating or something, and that would be nice, that would be nice, but we're not there yet. How do you know? So you find some weird configuration of molecules. How do you know what it does? How do you know if it's a shield against radiation? How do you know if it's part of a propulsion system? How do you know if it's a guidance system? How do you know if it's something that's interacting with the brain of the pilot, assuming there is a pilot? No, you can't, as somebody put it, it's like you give a garage door opener to Leonardo da Vinci, what is he going to do with it? So now I'm still, that's why I got into science, is because I like that kind of mystery. I like to work with people like me who like that kind of mystery, so I'm not going to be discouraged by that. I think it may be a test. And
in some ways it doesn't matter. In some ways it's the question. It's just the figuring out that something is a mystery that cannot be solved on this planet. That's the main thing. Once we get past that, then we can figure out, what it's supposed to do.
Well, how do we know that it cannot be solved on this planet? Let's go back to John Keel with his ultra-terrestrials. Maybe there is a hidden civilization at the bottom of the ocean that's been doing this for thousands of years. Or maybe, there is another universe 5 minutes ahead of us that has a gateway where, they can come in here. Maybe that's what UFOs are. Maybe they are gateways and not craft.
Yeah, now, I should have said that,
maybe the people who own those things from, let's say Roswell for convenience. Somebody owns, whatever crashed in the desert. Now, there will be two kinds of people there. And there will be the people who want to get to the propulsion system before the Russians, or the Chinese, But good luck. Maybe those things, how do we know they have a propulsion system? It's like somebody from the time of the horse and buggy, propulsion, looking at a Lexus, late model Lexus, looking for the horse. There isn't a horse, okay? So I think it's kind of stupid. And whenever there has been a project, a Pentagon project, it has all been, let's come up with the categories, and the categories are, propulsion and energy generation and so on. Maybe they don't have that. If it's a topological engine, you really don't need propulsion. You can rotate into a fifth dimension, and you're gone. You don't need an engine, with a piston and fuel and all that stuff. There was an article that I still can't believe that guy wrote that. There was an article in Science magazine in the 60s, say around 60, 65, 67. Science magazine, the standard for American science, from a very well-known, celebrated physicist, American physicist, member of the Academy of Sciences. And he said, there couldn't be UFOs because when we go to the site where the witness says he saw something, we don't find traces of propellants. He actually, and they printed that in Science magazine. And that's what, the skeptics, are still at that stage. If you don't leave, traces of propellant in the desert, you couldn't have had spacecraft. Well, yeah, our spacecraft use propellants, but remember, our spacecraft are based on the design of the ancient Chinese of 5,000 years ago, that they had rockets. I mean, they were launching rockets. And mostly for fireworks, but that's good enough. I mean, you can, with, that kind of rocket, you can go pretty high in the atmosphere. And that's essentially the same thing we're doing. Now we're guiding it with computers and all that stuff, but essentially, you take a cylinder and you fill it with something and you set fire to it and it goes up in the sky. And we're still stuck with that model, even the Pentagon. And this is not what it is. I mean, guys, come on, wake up. So you still have those people who are looking for the secret of propulsion of the UFOs. And then you have the other people who are more Silicon Valley types who are looking for the intellectual property. We're going to study this and we're going to find the IP and we're going to patent it and we're going to make billions of dollars, which is another stupid thing. But at least they are motivated to look at, to think about it in creative ways. So, I have nothing against, taking this to a lawyer, but I don't think the lawyer is going to tell you how this thing works. We need a different approach, and we need an open scientific approach to this. I mean, what's wrong with that?
I agree completely, but what's interesting to me is that the cutting edge scientific theorizing and speculation sounds a lot like ancient mysticism. Like, for example, I listened to your latest interview on Coast to Coast with George Knapp, in which you mentioned how you suspected that this phenomenon seemed to suggest that our space-time continuum, so where we, three-dimensional beings inhabit, is only a small subset of a bigger reality. And that really excited me because it resonates heavily with my way of thinking. And also because, well, pardon me for saying it, but it sounds a lot like ancient Gnosticism.
Well, wait a minute. Those are the guys who gave us science. So, they were doing science with the concepts and the memes and the philosophy they had in those days, and essentially we're asking questions about we're asking the same questions. And, they, around the 17th and 18th century, that morphed into modern science, but, Kepler was an astrologer.
Yeah.
Let's not forget that. And Euler, who is a great mathematician who gave us the logarithmic scale and the log tables that, nobody uses log tables anymore because we have computers, but, when I went to school, I had a book called The Table of Logarithms. That came from Euler. Euler invented logarithms to facilitate astrological calculation. He didn't do it for any other reason. And it worked. It still does. So let's pay tribute to those guys. I'm thinking of what the way we think about in popular culture, the way we think about the Muslims, and the Arabs, and the Arab culture. Look at the names of the stars. Algebra. They all think of how many stars have names that start with Al, and think about algebra and alchemy. Where did that come from? Well, the Arabs didn't necessarily originate a lot of that. They transmitted it from previous civilizations, also previous cultures, and then they added their own genius to it. And yeah, there is a continuum of scientific inquiry, and we're just at the tip of it. But we're not any more clever than those guys were, and we're asking the same questions.
Mm-hmm, definitely. I'm still confounded by the same mysteries, the same lights in the sky.
Yes, exactly.
Anything else, Graham?
Well, I don't want to keep you too long there, Dr. Vallee. Do you have anything that you want to say before we let you go?
Well, your question you asked at the beginning, that's a question that people ask often, and it's a fair question. What's new in the last 40 years? And it's, in a way, it's an embarrassing question because if I read, the MUFON Journal today, it's not that different from, the stuff that we were writing 40 years ago. But, we have to do that. We have to just keep documenting what we have. I think we have new concepts. I think that organizations like MUFON and the others around the world are doing a great job of, maintaining, because the newspapers are not interested anymore.
Yeah.
I mean, if it doesn't get resolved, quickly, they go on to something else. And what you find on the internet isn't reliable, but there are, good organizations that are scrubbing that record and keeping the good stuff. And we have to keep doing that. I think we have better instrumentation now to analyze the samples we've been talking about. In a way, what we need is more skeptics. But we need skeptics who are not stupid skeptics like we have now. We need skeptics that we can argue with, creatively.
Yeah.
In science, you always have to push against something.
Yeah.
Nobody ever comes up with a hypothesis, that, and they are the only ones to discover this, and they have, usually you have a hypothesis and you need a way to test it, and then other people have other hypotheses against you, and they test it against you, and that's how, the truth finally emerges. And we need that dialogue, which is why I say we need other labs to get involved and redo the experiments we're doing. And I hope, what I'm trying to do now, at my advanced age, I have no delusion that I'm going to solve the problem or that anybody else is going to. But we need to keep pushing and get more science done and get more people involved, including skeptics.
Yeah, it all contributes to the solution, and I appreciate you answering that somewhat embarrassing question, because I've been interested in this for 25 years on and off, and there's a couple answers to that. I mean, I've seen change, like the change that you're talking about, and change in our culture, but what hasn't changed in my mind is the acceptance in the scientific and academic community, which, I mean, I'm sure it has changed a little bit, but we're still at that spot where it's still, somewhat of a taboo subject. So I appreciate you addressing all the stuff that really is changing in the background.
And the science itself changes. I mean, 40 years ago, we were teaching at Northwestern, certainly Dr. Hynek and I and others were teaching that any slowly rotating yellow star that you saw in the sky probably had a planetary system around it.
Yeah.
But we couldn't prove it.
Right. Yeah.
That was something that you would derive from celestial mechanics and so on. Well, today, there are catalogs of something like 5,000 planets that we can actually see, or we can actually detect it.
Yeah.
May not be able to see it yet, but someday we will. So the skepticism has been eroded in science, and now they are teaching that because that's an exciting field. So that opens up the question: is there somebody living there? And what is life anyway? And you find out that they don't have a good definition of what life is. And that's embarrassing too. You find life at the bottom of the ocean when there is no air and no light. That's not supposed to happen. And you find life in outer space, not in outer space, but you find the components of DNA in outer space, complex molecules. Now, if I had said that when I took exams in astrophysics, I would have been thrown out. I would have no Astrophysics 101. But now we know that that's true. And that, if the components of DNA are there, and that, drifts down to a planet that has an atmosphere, what happens? So it's much more open. And the skeptics have to be a little bit more agile and a little bit more open-minded. And I think maybe that's the main change in the last 40 years.
Have you tried any of the CSETI stuff or looked at any of that?
Yes. Well, there are people within SETI. But there isn't one SETI anymore. There are 3 of them. I'm talking about the official astronomical SETI. It turns out all of them are in San Francisco, which is interesting in terms of culture. And that's exciting. And they have to be open-minded. So, I have hopes.
Well, I think that they were referring to Stephen Greer's CSETI and his prototypes.
I'm not referring to Stephen Greer. I have mixed feelings about what the people see when they go out on the hilltop and they look at the sky. I haven't seen any evidence of that. I'm talking about SETI, the scientific search for extraterrestrial intelligence. No, they are defining it strictly as extraterrestrial, which means they don't really want to look at UFOs. But that's changing.
Well, there's some big telescopes coming up soon as well, that might change everything altogether again.
If it's not extraterrestrial, what good's a telescope, though?
Well, when we get to the point where we can analyze or distinguish some of the gases in the atmospheres of exoplanets, I think that will, again, be another step forward. But of course, I think there should be a dialogue about the reliable UFO sightings.
True.
So, but I'm hopeful that dialogue, and it can be a sober dialogue without people yelling at each other. That would be a breakthrough.
Definitely.
Okay, I have to go, guys.
Yeah, thanks for staying on long with us, and we'll put links to all your stuff in the show notes as well. And we really want to thank you for coming on.
Thank you very much, and thank you for your questions, and thanks for what you're doing.
Okay, excellent.
Been an absolute pleasure, Dr. Vallee.
Hey, good night.
Good night.
Good night.
And that was our chat with the one and only Dr. Jacques Vallee. What do you think, guys? This is a big one for you guys.
Well, I should have clarified my question to him about I just want to bring that up right away before I forget. About the question of whether isotopes have been rearranged or molecules have been rearranged in something. It's funny how those guys in the scientific community go directly to, well, how are you going to figure out whether this or that was the intention or what that's for? I mean, to me, the most important part, and I shouldn't have said planet, I should have said something like paradigm or our what we know of can be human-made. Like something that shows there's an extra intelligence somewhere. That should be the quest for proof on that.
It's more likely we'll find ruins.
I think that what these guys are uncovering is that this intelligence is capable of manifesting objects, out of thin air, literally. It's alchemy. It's the ultimate alchemical trick to create matter out of energy, and vice versa.
Yeah.
So maybe what they're saying is, no, these are not craft coming from took off from the planet X in the Y galaxy and then landed here and left their trash and they didn't clean up when they left. Is that this intelligence manifested something that resembles a craft, or maybe it's interpreted as a craft by the witness, maybe because the phenomenon is mimicking the expectations of the witness.
Exactly.
By the way.
Yeah.
But it's using like components that turn out to be in a way terrestrial, but they are not ordinary. They are extraordinary in the same kind of confounding, tricksterish way that the phenomenon seems to be, getting at. Yes, what they're saying is, okay, so maybe the U.S. Army has like 100 crashed saucers in their hangars, right? But they can't do anything with that because, number one, they found they're made of terrestrial components, and number two, they found there's not actually a motor or a power source. So it's how is this like?
Or communications desk or anything, Yeah. We have the stories, and I don't discount them. That there is no control panel, there is no stick. It's more like the Ujang Vong from the Star Wars episodes. It's like a living craft in a way.
Oh my God, man! I was watching Netflix last night. I'm intending to rewatch Star Trek: The Next Generation, the whole 7 seasons. And the first two episodes, Encounter at Farpoint, it's so far out because they talk about this living craft, that capable of creating things, by sheer thought. That was the whole idea of the first 2 episodes of Star Trek, and I was like, wow, they were touching those ideas out there, spacefaring civilization like the Federation of Planets, the guys, us in the 24th century is still encountering something so alien and so incomprehensible, that the technology that it seems to exert, it's sheer magic.
Yeah, that's unreal. So the other thing, Darren, so if I watch the first 2 episodes, I can get that then? Like the first 2 episodes of Next Generation, is that what it is?
Yeah, the first Encounter at Farpoint.
That's hardcore 90s, baby.
Yeah.
93, baby.
Yeah, I've seen them all.
Yeah, I was watching some of them.
It's my favorite one.
Yeah. I can't believe it's that old now.
Getting back to our conversation with Dr. Jacques Vallee, I think we were lucky that he gave us a little more extra time.
Yep.
Out of the allotted expected time that he was going to talk to us, and I guess I covered like 5% of my questions. I guess I needed 2 extra hours to really milk the man.
Yeah. Well, I tried to stay away from, and then of course, Darren brings up the whole CSETI thing again. I tried to, I think you missed how I said keeping personalities and organizations out of it. I'm trying to get it to a people's movement and take away, all that and see what he says,
Fuck that. I wanted a CSETI answer.
Yeah, you didn't want to go there,
I know. That's good to know. It's refreshing.
Yeah.
Well. For what it's worth, I was, thinking about asking him about Tom DeLonge and the whole thing that the guy is promising to have this big reveal, and he seems to be in cahoots with people in the know, in the government. And some people were speculating that Dr. Vallee was involved with that, but he, was very adamant in that interview that I mentioned with George Knapp on Coast to Coast, that he has nothing to do with that. He was only asked to write the foreword of DeLong's book that he co-wrote with Peter Lavenda, and that's it. But I wanted to ask about his opinion on whether he thinks that Tom DeLong is going to be the next Paul Benowitz. In other words, the next someone who is an unwilling agent of disinformation.
Yeah. Yeah, he seems to be, I don't know, I don't want to say, but losing it a little bit. He was getting super political there, which it makes me wonder about, Podesta and Clinton and all that whole crowd of disclosure advocates.
Well, Ms. Vallee is totally, skeptical about the whole disclosure thing.
Yeah.
I mean, take into consideration that he once was promised, or he was lured by someone, a general, someone in the Air Force, to hand him and Dr. Hynek an actual film of a UFO landing. the infamous Holloman tape. Yeah, so he was the second person who was promised the tape.
Jeez.
But since he didn't have any reassurance from the people in the government that they were going to give them, they were, being very obscure and oblique about it. They told them, to get lost. They said, well, good luck with that, but we are not going to risk our reputation in something in which, it seems that we are just being played with.
Yeah. It was really fascinating talking to him about, what a great opportunity to get to talk to somebody like him who's been, in the circles, been on panels with McKenna. And he's talked to Keel and Dr. Hynek. I mean, Speilberg. It really is.
Yuri Geller.
It really is
Yuri Geller,
generation.
Hal Puthoff, Sarai, and all of that.
Yeah, a generation of people that were really shaping our view of consciousness and reality. Crazy.
Ingo Swann. Swann taught him to remote view.
Yeah, I mean, it's just fascinating.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, It was a huge honor, and I admit that I was very nervous at the beginning.
Oh, me too. I just stumbled across it for sure. But that's okay. It's all done now.
Oh, you guys did great. That was a fun one.
It's just great how open-minded he is about the the reality. He's not very dogmatic, but I mean the one thing that shocked me was how I don't think he understood the paranoia of the UFO groups and not giving up material. On one hand, he admits there's a cover-up, but on the other hand, he's like, well, I'll just hand it over. I'll just FedEx it to this lab in Poland. That's, that would be like people, and I mean, imagine just, being in a UFO group and you've got this material that's supposedly from a craft of some sort, and you're just going to hand it over to somebody to ship around the world. That's pretty,
We should get our hands on some of that.
Hey, you want some for
the studio? Yeah.
Well, I wanted to ask him. What's the last time that we actually had a case in which there was some physical evidence left? Because he's talking about Ubatuba, and that's 1957, man.
I know.
It's been a while.
I've always had the initial reaction that whenever I hear of those types of incidents that it's man-made, it's some sort of secret man-made stuff that's not working properly. When you get the people with the radiation poisoning or the people with physical, problems from their sightings.
The famous Cash Landrum case, right?
Yeah.
I'm very partial in that particular case, maybe only that one, and that was probably a man-made secret project because of the radiation that those witnesses suffered from.
Yeah. So I think maybe I'll ask in my next CC. Should I even say it? Maybe not. But I think I'm going to throw the intention out there that we want a physical specimen.
All right,
you don't have to land. Yeah, you don't have to land. Just throw me some slag.
Something.
Some slag.
Yeah. Give me some slag.
Yeah, give me an intergalactic bird. Flip me off. Or how about some intergalactic trash?
Sure,
Yeah, what
I'll take
if
it.
UFOs are living entities and the slag is their equivalent
Yeah.
of their
What if it's like an A&W drive-through cup from like
exactly.
1952? All right, well, that was a good one.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining us, Red.
Yeah, for sure. Oh man, it was my absolute joy and pleasure.
Bingo bango. Check out grimerica.ca/support, guys. Check out all the different ways you can help us keep having these conversations without any commercials. We don't try to sell you any shit, and we don't make you a product. So if you like them and you get a little value from them, check out grimerica.ca/support. Sign up for a monthly if you can. Everything from $1 a month to $30 a month. If you don't want to do that, you can do a one-time donation. And if you don't have any money, that's fine too.
Just spam Graham.
Just spam Graham. Review the show.
UFO sightings and
you guys need to tell people about the show. It's important.
Yeah, that's our most important marketing
Seems like you guys
campaign.
aren't telling people about the show anymore. That's the problem. You need to keep telling people about the show. Either by signing them up for the newsletter, grimerica.ca/news. You just punch the newsletter in there. Done. Or you just throw that shit on Facebook,
Yeah, you
Twitter,
can forward the
whatever,
podcast
wherever you
to
are.
forward it.
Spread it around. Get people on. We're going to have an app right away. That's going to make it a little bit easier.
Yeah, right.
That should be out in the next, 3-4 weeks. We should have the app out. So, yeah, fucking share the show. You got to share the show. You guys aren't holding up your end of the bargain.
Thanks, Red. Thanks for all your help, buddy.
Yeah, thank you guys.
Thanks for listening, guys. We will see you next week.
You make my life me over by the pumpkin patch. We'll wear straw hats. We can sip on apple cider, apple cider. Hey Andrea, come join me beneath this shady tree. You can curl up next to me and we can take a nap. If you're tired. When we woke, I was warm and comfortable, and it took one look from your brown eyes, and I'm inspired. You make my life better. Dearest Andrea, my heart goes thumpity thump. Simply me, now that's what I call a love letter. And I sat down next to her and I said, do you come here often? And she spoke. She pulled me in as if her beauty was a rope. The day I met her. You make my life brighter. You make my life brighter. his traveling buddies were on a rooftop. It's like time stopped. At first, Graham didn't see it, but his friends did see a UFO, most likely ET. Graham prayed to the sky. Papa said, I want to believe.
So I was like, is that it?
Now this UFO had a trick up its sleeve.
So I look up.
It came back swiftly.
Please come back.
Up over the horizon.
Through the thin haze of clouds.
It was polygonal.
So it was crystal clear like the shape.
Its shape was a dodecahedron. Dodecahedron.
Kind of like a 12-sided dice.
Dodecahedron. Dodecahedron. This UFO's traveling for eons. Dodecahedron. 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 This UFO's traveling for eons. Dodecahedron. Dodecahedron. This UFO's traveling for eons.
Split in half. The halves were rotating against themselves, and the whole thing was spinning slowly on its axis. So there was like two kind of levels of movement to it. So this UFO and a dodecahedron.
I want to believe.
Spam Graham.